Good morning. Thank you for that. So, unlike a lot of you this morning, I was actually at yoga. And let me tell you, it was actually my very first yoga experience. And many of you who know me on social media, I've been to many meditation groups and things like that. And oftentimes that takes place in a yoga setting. But let me tell you, yoga and meditation are very different. And it was a phenomenal experience this morning. So I mention it to you because the good news is there's another day tomorrow and another chance to do yoga with us tomorrow. So please, all of you join me tomorrow because I'm going to show up again, even though it's going to be probably a late night. So my name is Katie, and in 2017, I actually sat out there in the audience with a lot of you, and I attended the Ultimate Team Summit for the very first time. And as I sat in my seat, I was really quite quiet. I didn't speak to a lot of people. I was very reserved. And to be really honest with you, I felt really, really out of place. I remember the days leading up to the event. And at the time, I was on a team. It was a top producing team that we were doing over 100 transactions a year. And it would have been a really natural place for us to be at this conference. But I remember the days leading up to the event and thinking, how am I going to get out of going to this thing? It's just not my thing. I don't know how to network. I'm too shy to be there. And, there's way too much going on at home. We've got so many clients on the go right now. How is it that we could possibly take away 3 days of our time to sit in a room? And it's the beginning of the year coming into. So we've got a lot of goals and things that we want to future pace for next year. How can we possibly take away the time that we need to be sitting down in business planning? These were all the excuses that were coming up. And can I tell you a secret? This is probably the perfect place to be if you're looking to future pace for the year to come, if you're looking to have some goal setting. And there's a lot of great tools that we're learning here today, right? And over the next couple of days, yesterday and today. So as I was thinking of all these excuses and what am I going to do to get out of the event, I eventually sort of showed up and was kind of forced to come and didn't let those thoughts actually take hold. And as I sat in the room and I was super quiet and I was really keeping to myself, what was actually happening that everyone didn't know was that every time I stepped into a room with a group of my peers, with other successful professionals in the industry, it triggered all of the worst thoughts about myself. Now, on paper, I was a successful professional. I had every right to be here, and I had worked hard for where I was, but inside, I was a mess. And I was doing my best every single day to pretend that wasn't happening. So instead, what I did is every time I showed up to an appointment or a meeting or had some type of conversation with a client or even over the phone, what would happen is fake Katie would show up. And that was my way of putting on a mask so that nobody knew what I was hiding. What I was hiding is that I had been struggling with anxiety for a number of years, and it was building to a pressure point where I was going to blow. And when I say when I was going to blow, it wasn't that I was going to step into a room and all of a sudden I was going to blow, right? And everything was going to come out and maybe it was rage or whatever it was. No, I was going to shut down. And shutting down for me was not an option in the place that I was in my life. It just absolutely wasn't. So what was I going to do? So I showed up to the event, sat in my seat, tried to pretend like everything was okay, put on that mask. And to me, putting on that mask and showing up as cool, calm, collected, and confident Katie was my way of thinking of how a successful professional should show up. This is a tough industry, right? Can we agree? Like, we go through a lot of stuff on a daily basis that our clients have no idea of. And how many times do we have colleagues that, we're doing a deal with, and all of a sudden, the person on the other end is a raging bull. And sometimes they think that's for the good, and that's in negotiating. There's a certain style and tactic to be an aggressive negotiator. But other times, it's something else that's coming through that we have no idea what's going on in the background. For me, it was something completely different. I would show up cool, calm, and collective, able to negotiate, able to stand up and do what I needed to do, but it wasn't working for me. on paper and financially, I had everything that success should add up to. I had an amazing home. I had a wonderful husband, a life that, in all senses, I should have felt really grateful to have. And I felt a lot of shame and guilt that I didn't feel like that every day. A lot of the time, I was just a mess inside and going through the motions. So for me to understand where that was coming from, I mean, I read some of the books that was like, how do we develop more self-confidence? And you do this and you do this, and every day, you know, you try and you start your day off on a great routine, and it wasn't working for me. And I didn't know how to tell people that it wasn't working for me. So I put on the mask, put on the fake face, and I got really good at it. So good at it that absolutely nobody who knew me had any idea that I was struggling with anxiety. Not my husband, I didn't tell my coworkers, nobody knew. So for me to explain to you where that was really coming from, and this took a lot for me to kind of make this connection and go back, but I want to tell you a little bit about where I actually come from, and that's from Calgary, Alberta originally. Great place to live. But for me, unfortunately, I lived in one of the roughest neighborhoods. And it was an area that was really low income. And we struggled quite a bit in my family just to sort of, you know, stay afloat. And they did the best that they could at most times. But I ended up going to one of the worst rated high schools in Calgary. And I remember going into the first year of high school and things changed really quickly. So the people that I had gone to school with and grown up in elementary, all of a sudden, there was this big shift that happened. This place was real. You had to decide where you belonged very, very quickly. And so every school and, you know, organization and places that we work, we all have these different ways of sort of fitting in, and there's the cliques and the things that unfortunately segregate us a lot of the time, but it happens. You find your place. This was very different. You had to figure out which group you belonged to make sure that you were going to survive each day. This was a place where there was a lot of drug abuse, a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of violence, and a lot of crime. And I would look at the people around me and see how this was perpetuating in their family and how it was building and how, you know, they would fall into a group that was doing things that there was no way were going to contribute to any kind of lifestyle that you might want to have for yourself. And even early on, I knew I didn't want to have a lifestyle that involved me either ending up in prison, being a drug addict, or ending up dead. And that was real. So I did the best I could to avoid. I wasn't someone that was necessarily bullied in school. I always learned how to put on that fake front to come out as cool, confident, collected, confident Katie. And it served me well there. It allowed me to avoid each day, get what I needed to get done, and somehow stay off the radar. So I remember coming back from the weekend where I had tried my best to stay off the radar. And there was some stories circulating and some buzz in the hall about, you know, everyone, what they had done over the weekend. And, you know, it was nothing that you really wanted to hear about because it was all bad news. And so what had happened, unfortunately, was one of the people that I had been good friends with in my early years in elementary, I had lost touch with this person over the last year because he had fallen into a group that was doing some pretty bad stuff. And what happened was he had the story, I guess, at this point anyways, from what was going around, was that he had been speaking to a girlfriend of one of these rival groups. And they found him lifeless on the side of the road the next day. The story is killed by, you know, one of these people in one of these opposite groups. And you would think that that would be such a devastating thing to come in on a Monday morning and to hear. But it was like water cooler talk. Oh, did you realize this happened? This happened. And then it was old news. And people went about the rest of their day. But for some of us, it was pretty traumatizing. Because there was a big message behind what was going on and what actually happened with this young man's death. So a few days later, I ended up going to the funeral. And we're sitting there. And all of a sudden, a group of girls walk in and they sit at the back. Now, these group of girls were part of this other rival group that were rumored to be responsible for this young man's death directly. And as they sat at the back of the room, there was an undeniable tension there. And I don't know what the purpose was for why they were actually there that day, but all I can tell you is it felt like intimidation. It felt like we're sitting here to remind you what not to do. And if you do, this is what's going to happen to you. None of this was said with words. Nothing actually happened that day, but there was tension. And everybody got the message. It was business as usual after that. The rumors went on, and I don't know what came of an end result for some justice for that young man. And shortly after that, I moved to Toronto, where I started my real estate career. And things were very, very different for me. I all of a sudden had a lot of things that people around me growing up didn't have. And I had every reason in the world to portray to everyone else that I was happy. The problem was my success was on paper only. So as I sat in the room in 2017, all of those feelings were coming up. And what happened for me is when we talk about how fear, stress, and worry is impacting your business, it comes in the ways that we have absolutely no idea. Your unconscious mind does not forget the things that have happened in your life. It takes them in, it stores them. Sometimes it's irrelevant and it kind of moves on and it doesn't come up. But for me, it stored all of that fear of just surviving each day and worrying about what was going on and trying to avoid and just, getting forward to where I needed to. And it compartmentalized all of those feelings, shoved them down. I put it in some little box somewhere where I didn't realize it existed still. And the only time it surfaced was when I got in a room with a bunch of my peers where all of a sudden I wasn't good enough to be there. And all of a sudden, these feelings of anxiety that were triggered by fears that had nothing to do with what was going on in the room bubbled up. And I felt like I couldn't tell anyone because fear had told me, if you tell someone, this is what's going to happen to you. In my mind, none of that was happening on a conscious level, right? Like I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, well, this happened. And all of a sudden, oh, yes, that's what's happening to me. I feel like I'm not good enough to be here. Like nobody's thinking that when you're having that feeling. It just feels like garbage. So I found myself in one of the breakout rooms here 2 years ago and sitting down and hearing a presentation. And, it's Avalon Empowerment that's here today still. That is an amazing sponsor. I'm a master NLP practitioner at this point. What got me on my path was all of the struggle in getting to this point. I started taking the trainings not to understand and to work with clients, but to resolve what was going on with me internally because it was preventing me from making any steps further in my business. The fear that I was having was keeping me small. It was allowing me to have a reason to not show up. Every time there was a step that I could take that would be growth towards a better potential to what I was capable of in this business, fear popped up. And it said, you're not good enough to do that. Who are you? You're just a girl from a poor neighborhood that doesn't have a right to be there. It's the stories we tell in our head. And the problem is, who are you? At what point in your life did you start telling yourself those stories? Because if those stories are up to no good and they're running rampant, which for most of us on a daily basis, there's a lot of chatter that's going on. But the problem is, who are you at what point in your life when you started telling yourself those stories? Because the nonsense is not serving you. And how is fear and worry and stress impacting your business? Well, it's definitely impacting your bottom line. That takes up a lot of space. On an energetic level, just inside your mind, thinking about the things that might be going to happen or have to happen in the future that haven't happened yet, that maybe make us a little bit nervous each day. Prospecting for some of us is a good example. It takes up space. It doesn't allow you to flourish. So I want to explain a little bit more on the science level, where this fear comes from and what's happening for us. And And why it's important to know that there is a purpose there for it. So each of us have a little part of our brain, the amygdala. And the amygdala is responsible not only just for the emotion of fear, but it's responsible for the perception of how we perceive emotions. So perception of emotions is the key word here. So all of us have emotions on a daily basis. They vary at different times and they're triggered by different things. But the perception of how we're having that emotion and how it relates to something that's happening specifically is the important part. So what the amygdala is for is when we've had an experience, it stores that information. It keeps that memory somewhere and it allows for it to be recaptured at another point in time. Recaptured with a perception of what that emotion did for us at that moment. So it made perfect sense. For me, my amygdala was doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing. It captured the memory of fear and survival and everything that was going on back then, and it stored it attached to the perception of my peers. So the moment I walked into a room, fear told me, my amygdala told me that my peers meant avoid danger. It was a big problem. So I had to go inside to try and figure out how to actually navigate getting past all of that was going on. So I'm really fortunate today now actually to be able to work with clients on that emotional level when you hit a block. So we all get a lot of skills and abilities and things that we naturally have, and they take hold, and we go home from a lot of these amazing events with some real information. But what happens to a lot of us when we get home? We don't do anything with it. And it's not because we didn't learn it, and it's not because it wasn't of value to us. It's not because we don't have the resources or the time or the money to do it. It's because there's something that has said to us at some point, perhaps, I don't deserve this. I'm not good enough for this. Maybe money and success actually means something completely different for you than it does for somebody else. Maybe you have a fear of success or a fear of failure, because they're two very different things. But let me tell you, both of them result in not reaching the truest potential of what you're actually meant here to do. So I want to talk a little bit about synchronicity as well, because this really popped up for me this weekend. And synchronicity, for some of you that are not super aware or in tune with what that is, it's when things start happening around you that it's kind of like, what? Did that just happen? I swear I was just thinking that. So a good example is maybe you're sitting in the room today and you're having a conversation with someone, and all of a sudden a speaker comes on stage and they start talking precisely about the exact thing that you were just thinking about 10 minutes ago. Sure, coincidence, right? Common topic. But then it happens again on lunch. All of a sudden somebody says, hey, did you see so-and-so last week? They were talking about, and there it is, again, synchronicity. Well, synchronicity for me really signals being on true path. So being more true to who you are and what's going on, being in flow and being in alignment. And for real estate, a lot of us, it's a huge passion. It's something that we love. Real estate is near and dear to my heart. But there's also more to what's near and dear to my heart, and I wouldn't have been able to figure that out without going through the motions of fear and everything attached to it. So perhaps looking into yourself actually gives you a greater reason to do the job each day, because maybe it's seed money for something else. So in 2017, as I forced myself to sit there, the biggest thing that I did for myself was I actually spoke up at the end of that event, and I said to someone for the very first time, I'm really struggling with anxiety. Those words came with a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and a lot of embarrassment. But I said them. So fear, stress, and worry, they're impacting you on so many ways that you don't even realize on a daily basis. It's impacting your bottom line like we talked about, but it's also really impacting what's happening with your relationships and how you're making decisions each day. The biggest thing that you can do to work through fear is to realize that it's always going to be there. In varying degrees, though. As I stand here on stage, I can honestly tell you, anxiety is a word of the past. Does fear pop up for me? Quite often. What do I do with it when it rears its ugly head for me? I take a step in the motion and direction of exactly where that fear is. Because the one thing that you can do if you take away nothing from today is that if there is something that you are avoiding doing within your business, within your relationships, you should take a hard look at what that thing is and try and take a step towards it. The biggest thing you can do for yourself in reaching your next level, whatever your goals are for 2020, maybe it's more transactions, maybe it's living that top 1% lifestyle rather than just the dollar amount. I was sure looking for something that was much more than that dollar amount. The best thing you can do for yourself is take a step in that direction. Maybe it means hiring on more staff to leverage what you have, and maybe that feels a little bit scary. Maybe it's just a nervous feeling because how do I actually support another member on my team? Really look at the things that you're avoiding, because there's a lot of value that will come from inside, not just in that one action step. So Ryan really started us off yesterday on an amazing note, and synchronicity I was talking about, and when that pops up in flow, and I want to do something that's really similar here. I guess, am I out of time perhaps at the same time? Yes, I want to do just a little bit of a breathing exercise real quick. What we're going to do is, this is a rhythmic thing that you can do when you're feeling a little bit anxious. Works great in any situation. So what you're going to do is just take a deep breath in through the nose. And as you're breathing in through the nose, the thought that you're having is the one that you want to actually be increasing. So maybe that's confidence. Maybe that's acquiring new skills. So as you breathe in confidence and new skills, then you're going to breathe out through the mouth like you're blowing through a straw. And you're going to breathe out tension and worry, or fear, or scarcity, whatever it is that's popping up. Rhythmically. I breathe in confidence, breathe out stress. Thank you. Have an amazing rest of the event, and I look forward to chatting with a lot of you. Thank you.